Appreciate that. So welcome. My name is Colehour Bondera. Thank you for coming to this panel, Transforming Agriculture for an Organic Future. Before I introduce the session and myself, I want to go through a few logistics. So some of them are simple, but for all attendees, please keep your microphones muted at all times. Ask questions through the questions or chat tabs of the live discussion on your screen. We encourage you also to use the upvote button to highlight questions that you think are particularly good so that myself and Autumn can note those questions. I just want to make sure you all know, and it was just commented on, but it's important that this workshop will be recorded for viewing by attendees throughout the year. So if you do not wish to be on tape, keep your cameras off. Note really that the swap card platform, which we're all getting used to, I'm still not used to it, is more finicky with bandwidth than applications like Zoom. So if we experience time lag delays or choppy video, be patient. And if you have too many issues, the suggestion is that you can download swap card to your phone and rejoin the conference that way as a backup. And finally, use the Help Center button to the upper right of your screen at any time to raise immediate questions about issues that you're having using swap card. So let me just talk to you for a few minutes. In my opinion, we're all connected. My desire as a farmer and as a moderator of this is to look for connections. In preparation for this event, I thought about my personal connections. It's through connections, in my opinion, that transformations happen. And I want to give you a sense of myself by drawing upon some of my connections with today's presenters. Panelists are going to briefly introduce themselves after I speak. So I grew up on a farm in Oregon. As an undergraduate, I worked at NCAP, the Northwest Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides. And while I was there, I compiled the first NCAP draft document of that was titled Inert Ingredients and Pesticide Formulations. And I gathered some of my information from NCAMP, their office in Washington, D.C. The National Coalition Against the Misuse of Pesticides was later renamed Beyond Pesticides. Back in 1987, I was already aware of Jay Feldman and his work. After graduate school, I was hired as the International Projects Manager at Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, where I met Jeff Moyer, one of our panelists, who was a longtime farm manager of a large education and research organic farm. And then 20 years ago, my family and I settled on our small diversified organic farm in Kona, Hawaii. And after 10 years, my wife asked me why we maintain certification, since we were selling directly via our website and farmers markets. I had watched our Hawaii certifier close down due to having to pay for back-to-back audits by the National Organic Program. Big organic was really changing all the rules. So small organic was being squeezed out. And I felt like it was time to do something about this. And luck was with me that my Senator Inouye was willing to endorse me to serve on the National Organic Standards Board, the NOSB, and which I did from 2011 to 2016. And I began just after Jeff Moyer finished and when Jay Feldman was entering his second year. And my 5-year appointment meant I got to work with my classmates, who included none other than Jennifer Taylor. She would always stay strong on good answers, even when it was difficult. She didn't sell her votes or compromise while I was trying to understand the political games that decisions were being made upon. I truly felt that Jennifer was, and to this day is, a true sister in this good fight. At NOSB, I found myself inspired by testimony from people like Alan Lewis of Natural Grocers. Alan not only supported the efforts that made sense to me, but he did it from a different position and perspective, and this helped verify that my small-scale farmer views are truly community-based. Representing Cornucopia Institute, as a farmer and a spokesperson, Linley Dixon brought good perspectives to the NOSB discussions, and as a real organic project farmer, it's been good to work with Linley again on the kind of organic standards that make sense for me and small-scale organic farmers. So my purpose is to transform organic agriculture by working with the connections that we all have, by working together. My history has led me to serve as a Beyond Pesticides board member. It's but a thread in this meandering path towards the goal of connecting us all, showing one another how we can ensure to have organic, whole agricultural systems which have worked for many thousands of years. So now I want to listen to each of the panelists give us brief introductions, and then we're going to take your questions with the help of my assistant, Autumn Ness. My intention is to let the panelists chime in where it makes sense. I might direct a question to an individual, but all the panelists will help me figure out where it best settles and contribute their thoughts as needed. I thank to you all you participants, all you panelists, for trusting me through this process. I'm going to turn it over to Linley.
Hi, I'm Linley Dixon. I'm located in southwestern Colorado in a town called Durango, where I'm on a 6-acre certified organic farm that sells mostly vegetables through direct marketing. I'm here as co-director of the Real Organic Project, which is a farmer-led nonprofit created to restore the integrity of USDA Organic. And the label behind me is an add-on to certified organic food label for organic farms that pasture livestock and grow crops in healthy soils, which is shocking that that's not actually part of the organic program anymore. So that's part of why we came together. One of the farmers that we've certified said to me, I think the R in Real Organic stands for relationships. And so much like what Colehour was saying, I think when we come together and work on creating that vision of the future for agriculture, if we work together on actually implementing what we all want to see, I think we can do amazing things. And that's what this conference is all about to me. So the Real Organic Project, in addition to creating this add-on label, also works to educate eaters about all the benefits of healthy soil and pasturing livestock. So there's nutritional benefits, community benefits, clean groundwater, jobs in the local communities, a lifestyle that a lot of young people are choosing to live, being successful as a farmer. And of course, planetary benefits like carbon sequestration. So we do a lot of education as well. And one of the most beautiful things about the Real Organic Project is that the pioneers of the organic movement, people like Jeff Moyer and everybody at this conference, they've really come together and joined hands with the next generation of farmers. And, I'm even getting the next generation below me to be involved to, work on what's next, this idea of continuous improvement, not, stagnating at where the USDA has actually even lowered the bar from where we started. So really going to move forward to creating a vision of agriculture that we all want to see. And that's what the Real Organic Project's all about.
Thank you, Colehour. Thanks, Linley. Alan Lewis, I work at Natural Grocers. And for those of you not familiar, we have 160 plus stores in 20 states west of the Mississippi. These are very purist health food stores with a very keen focus on supply chain integrity. For instance, we only sell organic produce. If it's not certified organic, forget about it. One of my great privileges of my job is getting to travel the country and set foot on farms, get my boots dirty, talk to farmers about all of the issues that they're facing. Some like Linley, which is our store is a few stones throw from her farm in Durango. We can't figure it out how to buy what she grows. It's really frustrating. I have had some really big successes though with regenerative eggs and poultry and other parts of the supply chain where we've completely changed not just the farm and a farm family, but the community by bringing up our shoppers' awareness of the value of these products. You pay more, sometimes you pay a lot more, but what you're buying is clean water and air. You're buying education for kids in rural areas. You are protecting your health, protecting animal welfare, and all of those things come together in this idea of regeneration. And in particular, the way the Real Organic Project looks at agriculture and community as a thing, right? A one thing, not separated things. So I'm really glad to be here. And of course, it's all about learning more and challenging some of those old held beliefs day after day after day. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with my fellow panelists and with all of you attending and listening in. I can't wait to get your questions. I'm currently the CEO of Rodale Institute, but for a very long time, as I was the farm manager for Rodale Institute, a research and education facility located in eastern Pennsylvania. We now have 7 campuses across the country, 8 if you count our virtual campus. And we are in Jennifer State Research Facility in Georgia. We have one in Iowa, California. We will soon be opening up an international research education facility. So we're excited about the growth of the Institute. Along with being the Farm Institute, I also have my certified organic farm at home, which has transitioned into being a dairy replacement heifer operation for my son's organic dairy. So we have a fairly large animal production unit, of which I am being probably less employee. I get to work with my son there. I'm a past board member of the USDA's National Organic Standards Board and had the pleasure of being able to chair that board and that committee and work there for 5 years. I am a current and founding board member of Regenerative Organic Association, which is really the holder of the ROC standard, the Regenerative Organic Certification Standard. So that the Alliance, the certification standard, are held by that board, and I was the chair of that board for several years as well. I'm really deeply involved in training new farmers, as that's an exciting opportunity for all of us who have been in this community and in this industry for a while. And so I helped start a program here at Rodale Institute to train farmers. We have a veteran training farmer program. We have a very dynamic internship. And we also have a farmer in training program, which is really exciting. And then I also helped start an organization, another nonprofit called the Seed Farm Incubator Project here in Pennsylvania, where we bring farmers on board. And not only do we train them to be farmers, we guarantee that they can have land and access to land. So those are exciting projects that I get to work on, along with some other boards that I serve on, which is probably too many to name here. Thank you, Colehour.
Jennifer?
Okay. Do we need to ask for mics to be muted if we're not talking? I'm Jennifer Taylor, an organic farmer, a small-scale BIPOC farmer in the great state of Georgia. In light of our being here today and being able to tell the story of the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis and impact on our family, our work, our communities, and our very lives. And at the same time, we all experienced being made more aware of the inadequacies and injustices and lack of inclusion and lack with Black and Indigenous peoples through the determinists of the Black Lives Matter social movement. And did you know that today, this very day, while we're sitting here on this panel, marks the grave anniversary, the 1 year since the murder or the killing of Mr. George Floyd. Today, we remember, we don't forget. So if you had an opportunity to present change, what would that change look like for you? If you have an opportunity to live change in this life, in your organic life, in organic agriculture, to live change in the organic communities and extend it boldly outside of our normal community connections into other neighborhoods and other farming communities, into Black Indigenous farmers and farmers of color and their communities, into underserved small farm populations and their communities, and socially disadvantaged farmers and their communities. What would that change look like for you? How do you live the change that you want to see take place? You always hear that. How do you live that change in the organic communities, in organic agriculture, in the learnings and teachings and education, the trainings and technical assistance in sharing and building leadership and resources with Black and Indigenous farmers and farmers of color and their communities, with underserved small farm populations and their communities. We have another opportunity here today to discuss change and to implement change. This is what my work is about. And this is what we together have an opportunity to do for our today and for our tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and to all of you. So Autumn's going to help me, but I don't yet see any questions from our participants. Is that correct, Autumn? So I'm going to go ahead and start out with asking a few questions, or we'll see how far it goes, but I'm going to start out with a question and then we'll go from there. I guess this wasn't the first question that I wrote down, but I think that based on the fact that Jennifer just presented related to this topic, I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. And Jennifer, you could first respond to it, but I'm actually curious about all of your responses, but I think I would be curious about how Jeff feels about this too. The question is, how can we capacity build the farms and farmers across the country who have been left out of the organic transformation? So like you said, Jennifer, you talked about that your work needs to happen, but my question is how to so achieve it? What action steps or what processes need to be occurring to broaden our organic inclusion? Thank you.
Jeff, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I don't mind. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I misunderstood. I thought
unless you wanted me to answer, Colehour, I'm happy to jump in. I thought Jennifer was going to jump in. Whatever works.
Okay. I probably misunderstood. I thought he said you and myself.
So Jennifer, go ahead and start, and then let's.
You start, Jennifer.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So I do think it has a lot to do with building relationships and being inclusive of the education and training, the types of education and training that we find ourselves providing to large-scale farmers and medium-scale farmers and agribusiness, to be more inclusive of technical assistance and capacity building programs with Black and Indigenous and farmers of color populations in their communities. And also with the acknowledgement that different communities have different types of organic farming systems, practices, and that our education and training that we provide, that we want to work with to provide, and we want to provide co-leadership in the development of naturality, has to have the fingerprint of the farming populations that we're working with. So we're not saying that in the organic movement as it is now that we have all the answers and we have all the learning and come look and learn this thing, but we are willing to learn ourselves, and we are willing to become the participant as well and the co-learner in a type of participatory type of learning strategy. I do think that oftentimes communities of color are really concerned about healthy living and healthy living practices. And so therefore they want to know the organic farming systems practices that build healthy living and healthy communities at the farm and in the environment and for their communities. And I feel that that is a source of agreement that we can work from as we identify needs and work together to meet the challenges.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add a few things, Colehour. I don't want to monopolize the time, But when you look at things from a big picture perspective, there's a whole lot of things that we could be doing differently that would help farmers, not just of color, but of that scale of the small holding farmers across the country who want to do something differently. Our policies, for example, our government policies do not incentivize or support the outcomes that we want to have as a consuming public. We need to change policies so that we can incentivize the behaviors that we want. We need to support consumers that want to make a choice. Alan already mentioned that it's difficult for him to purchase product into his really unique and forward-thinking supermarket chain that Linley is trying to. There's a disconnect there. And if there's a disconnect and we see the problem, then we can find solutions. We need to change the way meat processing is done so that we can encourage more small-scale meat processors to be able to step in and take care of smallholders that are processing or want to process meat. Here in Pennsylvania, if you want to get an animal butchered, you have to schedule the processing of that animal almost a year and a half in advance. Even born, you have to schedule the date when you're going to have it processed. Well, how do you know when that's all going to happen and you have a date and time selected? We need to make consulting more affordable for small-scale producers and BIPOC farmers. And we can do that. Here in Pennsylvania, we work with our state government to make it free of charge to organic. The day we did that, we had over 100 farmers call us. There's a pent-up demand for that. We know people want to move in that direction, but they can't always afford the consulting. So we can make that consulting affordable, or even in this case, free, with very small amounts of money from. And then last but probably not least, we need to work with the banking and lending agents. We can encourage them to either accept more risk or be able to have their risk carried by government agencies so that all landowners can have access to the capital and the resources that they need changes on their farm if we expect that to be an outcome. And those are all things that are completely doable. They're not outrageously expensive. We just have to refocus our capital to get the outcomes that we want.
Okay, thank you both for your very useful responses. I don't know if either Alan or Linley have anything to add. You don't have to. I have other questions, so if you do, though, please.
Oh, Colehour, I jump in briefly because I live in Boulder County, and people who don't know think that it's some sort of liberal paradise, and in fact, it's an agricultural disaster zone. And we are working very hard because the county owns 25,000 acres of agricultural land, which it can lease, which it can leave fallow, which it can do all sorts of things with. And for 30 years, it's basically made all the wrong decisions, including leasing it to GMO commodity crop farmers. And they return that land completely broken, right? Has to be remediated as if it's desert. And then all the conservation easements do the same thing. That grassland is left fallow, which is essentially 5 to 10 years before the desert takes over. So all of the things that we're talking about is what we're doing at the local level. Take that land, reapportion it for its proper use, get community access on there. So keep the outbuildings, the equipment, and the training that's available so that a family can have a quarter acre to farm using the water rights that are there, and start building this whole community agriculture perspective that where the community's doing the agriculture. And then, of course, doing that without toxic pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. So we're at the top of the headwaters here, headed down towards the Gulf of Mississippi. We're doing everything right for people and planet and animals and insects. Good. Wish me luck, because this is Boulder County.
Thank you.
Yeah, Alan, as a follow-up, Alan, we, Rodale Institute, tried to work with Boulder County, and we were invited in to do some things. You may remember some of the that we got as farmers resisted any type of change that would be coming. Jennifer started her conversation with talking about change. change is difficult. Change is hard. People resist it, try to fight for the status quo, and that's what you're seeing happen in Boulder County right now.
Yeah, there's a longstanding GMO contingent funded by Syngenta, Monsanto, and Pioneer, and they have no intention of letting organic become the dominant practice. So there is that political thing, and I've got meetings with the commissioners on Friday, and it is basic science literacy that we're starting with.
Come here, baby.
Good soil will hold fertilizers and pesticides. You know, so we start where we are. I guess, Colehour, that's the answer. You start where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
good point.
So I think that we have some questions coming through in the chat, but one of them kind of relates to a question that I wanted to ask Linley and maybe Alan to chime in on, but I'm going to try to associate the question with it, but we can then make it broader. And it's really about the scales of the options that exist. And this is a confusing topic, but it's really about how we apply scales. Linley mentioned the fact that small scale operations have difficulties with marketing, et cetera. But for me, as a farmer, that turns into the whole labeling paradigm and how labels for consumers relate to the scales in terms of being confusing to the consumers and how that helps inform them or confuse them. So I think that I want to combine that question of scales of operations and types of operations in terms of being able to get produce to people, and how that's applied, but then also how that informs at the consumer end in terms of labeling and the confusion of different labels. Linley, if you could address that, and maybe Alan, you have some thoughts. Thank you.
I think we're already winning in that the eaters want the kind of food that we're growing, but they're getting really confused in the marketplace. And so, I mean, that's what the Real Organic Project is out to try to fix. I think, of course, they want USDA Organic, and we saw sales really increase over the pandemic when people were shopping for themselves more instead of out at institutions when they were making those decisions. So I think they want that food. And the challenge is the companies, kind of these large scale, specialized, standardized, even the distribution is so standardized. It's like pushing the easy button that Alan calls it. Those companies are so good at making the consumers think they're getting something other than what they're getting. So you see a cow on pasture and it is not the reality, or you see a chicken on pasture and they're actually confined in a building. And so we just have to get around that confusion. And of course, every time a really good label comes out, like Certified Humane actually has really great standards for outdoor pasturing. You've got the American Humane Certified label, and it just gets so confusing to the consumer and to the eater. So I think our challenge is to continue, and we're always going to have to be reaffirming, staking our claim, educating the consumer how to navigate these tricky waters. It's always going to be confusing, but the challenge is I think the education is there. We've got the consumers that want that food, and the challenge is to, as a movement, that's authentic. It's not coming from a brand or a company. It's coming from the people. We are telling them, this is the food that you want. We are the real deal.
So as a practical matter, what Linley touched on is that we have lost the local produce aggregator and delivery systems, right? The big distributors now are massive multi-billion-dollar companies. They're sourcing from around the world. And when I do this presentation, I show the idea that Linley's going to back up with her pickup full of crates of tomatoes and peppers or greens or whatever. And the people in the typical supermarket have no idea what to do with those, right? The reason things are bagged and clamshelled and commoditized and UPC'd is all about efficiency for scanning at the register so that untrained people can move product around, put it on the right shelf, all of this. That's what we lost, and that campaign to destroy and weaken I'm going to call it the county level logistics, is why I can't get Linley and 24 other organic growers around Durango, Colorado, into my produce shelves on a reliable basis. So, yeah, not proud of that, and we're still working on it. But COVID really threw us a loop. And I'm going to circle back to Real Organic Project, because when I sit down in the board meetings and everything, agriculture is so imbued in the community that there's no separating the two. But a lot of people think of agriculture as something that somebody does in the ends up in the grocery store, right? So bringing that back together, like my pipe dream in Boulder or in Durango, is where we're headed to start for mainstream shop.
I want to briefly respond to Marjorie here, who says, I still want convenience and speed at checking out. And I think we completely agree. And that's what we're seeing, is that we're not, as local producers, we're not able to get into those retail establishments by wholesaling through the back door anymore. Even if we say, hey, we're going to have a reliable product every week for 4 months. The people with money and power are saying, no, you need to carry us year round. And at this price point, it's too easy and convenient. And so they don't even want to deal with us for the few months that we're available, or even if we had a reliable product year round, it's still at a higher price point. So those are the challenges that we have to overcome.
Excellent points. I agree. Yeah, let's follow up more generally with a question also from Marjorie Roswell regarding this topic of applications that people can use. Specifically, one was mentioned by Henriquez, Land PKS. I'm not familiar with that app, but her question is, does anybody use that? Do any of us use that? But also, are there other apps that help move the work forward? Is there appropriate technology that you wish that more people knew about, outside of apps or including apps? So I don't know. That question's open to whoever has any thoughts or responses, please.
Well, I've seen a lot of those.
QR codes now. Oh, it's a brief comment. Just our farmers are using QR codes now to redirect them to the Real Organic Project page so you can see the farm.
Colehour, I think those apps are a lot more useful for a chef, for instance, or a school that needs a delivery of 6 cases of beets, or whatever, as opposed to me getting up on Saturday morning and saying, I don't feel like going to the farmer's market. Let me see where I can get 3 big carrots to make something, right? So I've helped with a lot of those apps, but they ultimately aren't providing the micro scale that typical people shop at. On the one hand, buy your vegetables fresh every day. On the other hand, the cost of doing that direct with a farmer is crazy.
Anybody else have thoughts? Okay. So let's move on to another question. I had it here, but then of course I lost it. I apologize. I guess that this question kind of relates to a question that I was going to ask, which I still will, but I think it's really about, again, this is, I think, going to be for all of you, even though you could choose to, as you see fit. But I think it's a topic that before session we conversed about a little bit. I think Alan mentioned this subject of false change. And for example, do we really need glyphosate for regenerative agriculture, as but an example, because that is one of the talking points of some of the entities. The question really is, how do we best inform the public or work on these deceptive strategies? Why doesn't organic need glyphosate, for example? Like, do we start by reacting, or do we start with some kind of understanding out there that makes the public know that those distinctions? I mean, this overlaps with the labeling question to some degree, but I think it's really from a whole population or consumer perspective as well, although it overlaps with farmers. And anybody who has thoughts on this, please.
Well, I might jump in while their thoughts a little bit. Clearly, the notion that if we define the terms like regenerative in ways that facilitate or allow the status quo to exist, there is a large segment of the population that's thrilled with that idea. Not on the consumer side, but on the producer and processing side. So what you're seeing in the world now, the food community and in the farming community, is this race to try to define what regenerative means. For many, many years, 30, 35 years, we worked around and skirted around this word sustainable. And that was a word that was used by marketers in every niche and corner of the world, whether you were making pens or telephones. Everybody had a sustainability committee and everything was sustainable because it was a marketing word. But there was absolutely no certification or standard that meant anything. So sustainable and sustainability ended up meaning everything, and it ended up meaning nothing all at the same time. Marketers are worn out sustainable, and they have been looking for another word, and they like the word regenerative because it's new, they can define it, they can work on it. Could regenerative be allowed to use glyphosate? Well, of course, if you're a farmer and you want to get your on the regenerative term linked to your, you need glyphosate, you're going to say, of course it does. But the reality is it doesn't, but it shouldn't even be allowed to be used in the same sentence with the word regenerative. It's like saying you want to be an Olympic athlete, but you still want to smoke 2 packs a day. Well, you can say that, but it doesn't make you an athlete. You actually have to do the work. And in order to do the work, we have to have definitions. It's the only reason that Rodale Institute designed the word regenerative as it, and get to the word organic, or the word way, and the reason for the Real Organic project that grew out of the need for representing these words to the public in ways that are meaningful. And as we see the USDA standard, as Linley clearly identified as being weakened, downward pressure is being put on it, those of us in the community that want to represent regenerative and regenerative organic food or real organic food need to push the bar to make the word meaningful. That does require some education of consumers, which we be challenging, but we're in it for the long haul, and we have to claim the territory and the definition around those words, or we'll lose than just the word, just the idea of glyphosate. A lot more bundled up into that. There was a time when people in organic, and if you remember way back to and before 2002, in the there was a huge push to allow glyphosate. And people said, well, Roundup, come on, what's wrong with Roundup? Surely we can use that in organic. And we said, no, cannot use that. Surely we can put chickens in houses. They don't need to be outside. They're just stupid chickens. No, we can't do that. Antibiotics, come on, we give them to our grandkids. That doesn't hurt anything. We can use antibiotics. No, we have to stick to that high bar standard, or the industry by default will continuously try to push the bar down. Thank you for allowing me to be on my soapbox, Colehour.
No, thank you. Other responses?
I had the privilege of getting to hear the interview with co-director Dave Chapman, who's here today, and Paul Hawken, and he touched on this subject quite a bit. He talked about, is it real change if, Pepsi goes regenerative? And everybody gets so excited when, you can get large acreages changing, but when we have policies in place that make a can of Coke as cheap, if not cheaper than bottled water or we don't even have clean water in the first place, we're not seeing real change. Or if we've got, great, we're converting acreages of grain over to organic, but then we're feeding it to CAFOs. Like, we need to see the entire system, actually facilitate. And I get it. There's ways to create incremental change, small changes. But I think, talking to some of the biggest, what's the future that we want? And we need to do it fast, right? Climate change is it's the issue of our time, and we have to do it now if we're going to see any impact. And so, people like Alan Savory and Paul Hawken and some of these leaders are saying, what is the future that we need? And we need to start creating the steps to get there now. And I see these small kind of human scale farms really being the solution. And so that's where I want to put my energy, is to creating, and of course, like 70% of the food that is grown for people right now already comes from these small farms. So the idea that we can't create change on a smaller scale with lots of people, I think really that's the only way to do it.
Colehour, let me try to add quickly. The connection with agricultural toxins and the human biome, I spoke about it earlier in the conference in my piece, but as a health food store, last year we did 8,000 hour-and-a-half long nutrition counseling sessions through our in-store nutritionists, and that's all something we provide for free. We know what's going on. And the ADHD, the eczema, the asthma, the autoimmune diseases, the obesity, the diabetes, all of this stuff is rampant. And when you make the connection between glyphosate and the adjuvants in Roundup and how it affects your microbiome and the importance of your microbiome directly to your health and all those conditions I just mentioned, there's the biggest catalyst. That's where people start asking the right questions and willing to pay a little bit more to get food that actually supports their health. Because, we would all live on fire Fritos and Oreos if we could live to 120. Well, not all of us. And then, but so that's really bringing people back at the same time where the farmers are having their own issues with that industrial extractive agriculture. And those are the two groups that, if they come together, will be the movement, the regenerative farmers plus the regenerative consumer. And Jennifer, I'm going to call you out. I know you got something to say. So
I agree with you totally. I think a lot of the benefit of glyphosate, the benefit, we can link it to the disaster, the havoc that it causes for human life and for soil life, farm life, environment life, that havoc that it causes. And that's the benefit, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we've done this. We've never asked farmers to do what we want them to do. They're asking the wrong questions. If the goal of agriculture is to kill weeds as quickly and cheaply as possible, glyphosate is perfect for that. But if the goal is to produce healthy human beings and a healthy planet, it is the absolute worst. And we have to challenge farmers and incent what we want them to do. If left to their own devices, they're going to try to hit that easy button. Fast, easy, and cheap button. That's what they do, because every industry will do that. Nobody is in business to do things the way possible to make it really hard and to make it really slow down. It's not what it does, but we have to ask the right question first. And we've never started with the right question. How do we produce healthy human planet in conjunction with a food production and fiber production system that will facilitate that? There's no purpose in that conversation. Use it and will not use it if their goal is different. Weeds as possible. It's the perfect tool.
Right. And the other one, I believe, issue in hand with what you're saying, Jeff, is if we could also get the consumer to vote with their dollar. with the knowledge of the impact, the harmful impact, destructive impact of glyphosate on their food and in their food system and in their bodies and in the bodies of their children. You know, if we could get them to vote with their dollar, I think that we will see change there too. If we can encourage them, marketing campaigns, you know, to encourage just straight away on the benefits of glyphosate for the human population alone.
My brother uses Roundup at his home all the time. Weeds die the second he sprays it on there. Consumers have no idea the poisons they're dealing with and the ramifications that has on their own. I mean, just hearing the speakers earlier today talk about that these materials are having, and Alan, you're really correct in pointing out it's not just the poison, it's all of the subsequent in with it, the surfactants to make it work, and all the inert ingredients that aren't really so inert. We need to look at all of that and the impacts that's having on our body chemistry, and nobody wants to talk about it because it's an expensive question, and nobody wants to admit that they're. I'm going to tell you a liberty here and tell you about my neighbor. He is an 80-year-old long-time farmer, been farming his whole life. I wrote an article about climate change that he took offense to in a local newspaper. So he came running. Every morning I go walk before I come into my office, and I walk past his driveway. And he came running down the driveway with the newspaper saying, "You don't actually believe this stuff, do you?" And I said, "Well, come on, Roy, I don't want to fight with my neighbors, but let's face it, weather patterns are shifting and changing." Oh, of course, it's nothing like it was when I was a child. And I said, change. He said the next thing, because we actually rent his farm and we farm his land, my son does. He said, "I know you guys are organic." He said, "But you don't believe that there's a problem with glyphosate and Roundup, do you?" And I said, "Roy, they actually found glyphosate in the fat tissue of penguins in Antarctica." His comment to me was, "Well, that just means it's naturally occurring. They just figured out how to put it into a bottle." So he said, "You could not tell me that the federal government would allow us to spray poison on the landscape that would make people sick." And I said, "Exactly what we did, Roy. Exactly." Right. But farmers can't believe that. They will not accept the fact that they have done something so in their quest to produce low-cost food. It's a challenge. There's challenges all over the place to get that message out there. So I apologize for taking license to talk, but.
And if we could just add one more layer is to work with the land grant institutions who support a lot of the industry that supports glyphosate and makes glyphosate along with other.
If you took out of, they wouldn't be teaching anything in ag.
Yes. But redirected to regenerative organic strategies and management systems. It just needs a change in the paradigm of the thinking and the support mechanism.
One last follow-up. Natural Grocers only sells 100% grass-fed beef, and it's certified by Savory and AGA. That is $8 a pound hamburger. $8 a pound hamburger, which means you can work for an hour and not be able to afford it in a lot of places. But it's really important because when the shopper or the consumer gets the idea that they are restoring topsoil, cleaning up water, having well-managed cows, families that can go to school and get medical care and actually retire and have a succession plan, $8 an hour, $8 a pound suddenly makes all the sense in the world. But the other part of that is nutrition. You can eat a quarter pound at dinner, not a half pound, and you can eat it 2 days a week, not 4 days a week, and you will be better off from a health perspective, unless you're some sort of endurance athlete or whatever. There you have your $1.99 a pound hamburger. Use your money when you vote with that dollar to buy the right thing for all the right reasons, and then use it effectively. That's where this is heading, slowly and painfully, but that's where it's heading.
So right track there, Alan. I mean, what we're seeing is people will gladly stand in line, and they're standing in line as we're on this call to buy the latest Samsung cell phone for $2,000. They'll pay for that phone, which is a the hamburger plus, so, and they won't agree to pay for that. But that impacts their health. But they have to trade in their $600, $1,000 cell phone. It's insanity to me. And we talked earlier about apps. You can't see my phone, but it looks like it was driven over by a tractor. These apps, you know, I don't need a $2,000 cell phone. I'd rather eat $8 hamburger.
Well, I think that's an excellent transition into a topic I wanted to bring up, which is sort of alluded to in some comments in terms of not just apps, but also, different kinds of technology. Because I kind of wanted, I'd love all of your responses. I was thinking that, Linley and or Jennifer from different perspectives might have a response to this, but I think you all would, which is related to the fact that iPhones really are a means of information dissemination, especially in younger generations. Like Jeff just said, I have quite a number of farmers right directly around me that are adjacent to me that don't even use the internet, least of all any of these other processes, and flip phones and everything are very common among older farmer generations. So I recognize that, but I think from a farmer perspective and a consumer perspective, my question really is how we can best involve and affect healthy systems to come from the capacity of information sharing that we are dealing with, because we are all consumers of food. And how can we reach out and inform and educate the younger generations, and or they can inform and educate us using these other means of learning and communication. And again, I'm not talking specifically only about consumers. I'm talking about consumers and or farmers at, the younger generations and the new methods of communications.
I mean, Colehour, it's gotten so crazy that Natural Grocers is one of the premier science educators in the country. And we published the Health Hotline, which is a science-based article about nutrition and agriculture and all these other issues. And we push it out by email, with text reminders. We mail 500,000 copies of a science magazine from a supermarket for all the things that we're talking about today. Because if you go out into the broader world, there's the campaign of confusion and that you'll get lost in, and then there's intentional misrepresentation. And you could sum up our brand by, we're going to go underneath it. We're going to find out the truth. We're going to hand it off to you, and we're not going to sugarcoat anything. So yeah, every means possible, including what Jennifer and Linley do on their farms, just working with the people who come by to buy something. That's one voice at a time.
I'd say we have a situation now too where we really need technology in order to implement the standards. So if we use satellite data to actually confirm whether or not cows are out on pasture, even though the paperwork lines up, everything looks good for the inspection, we need to be going that extra step to assure the consumer that what is on paper is actually what's happening. And we're not doing that right now. The Real Organic Project is using satellite data for our inspections, but the NOP needs to be doing that. They have a huge budget, in comparison. That's something really easy that they can do. They can use it to track these ships that are coming in with fraudulent organic grain. So we really need to step up our game at the National Organic Program in terms of technology. And, in the meantime, when farmers are kind of forced into just only direct markets, we need to be communicating every day what we're doing, post a day, here are the cows on pasture. And so people know that they're getting the real deal.
Jennifer, do you have any feedback?
I like the idea of what COVID made us start doing, the virtual learning, on-farm virtual learning. And I at first thought that it wasn't something that farmers would engage in, but it actually has turned out, maybe because it was the only option available, this past year. But at any rate, I found that to be really successful. Low tech, farmers can engage through their phone and participate in virtual learning and pull it up when they need to if it's recorded. look at it at different times of the day versus the time that it's actually offered, which is generally not a good time. But that's not an app, but I find that to be something that I think will be useful in our future, and it really proved useful this past year.
Thank you. I just want to yellow flag us all that we have less than 5 minutes left for this session, because we're going to be automatically cut off. And also I have a 3-sentence thing I'll be reading to everybody at the very end. But so this might be the last question to go around. But I think that you all have given a lot of very useful and interesting information from my perspective. You know, I don't know where to direct this inquiry, but I think that it overlaps to a lot that was already said. And maybe you all have some ideas. And Jeff, I think this thought evolved from something that you mentioned in one of our pre-sessions. But, you know, the question is, how can we involve conventional and or GMO farms into transitioning to organic? What do they need? What's the missing pieces or the strategy that's most effective to attract or involve those farms towards our organic vision? And I don't want to direct it to somebody, but anybody who wants to step up, please.
I'll answer it really quick.
No, go ahead.
Just transparency. Cheap food and the way that we produce food now on it wouldn't exist if people knew actually how it was being produced. So we need transparency, and people are going to make the right choice. They already want it.
Well, our system wouldn't exist without all the subsidies that we put in to support systems. We have to, crop insurance is being managed. We have to change the way equip dollars. There's a lot of federal dollars pouring into agriculture, and we need to change how that is working. On the really bright things, one of the bright spots that I see on the horizon is, I think, you know, I may have mentioned it, or maybe it was in another conversation I had earlier today. Look at the average age of farmers in this country. It's somewhere around 58 to 59 years old, and that's true pretty much around the world. That doesn't tell the true story. If you look at the median age, it's we have 6 times as many farmers over the age of 65 as under the age of 35. That means that over half of the land that's being managed in this country alone is going to change leadership. Opportunity for us. It's a once in a lifetime, literally, opportunity for us to make substantive change in the way farms are being farmed. And I think if we're going to be capitalized into a production system that you can't change just because of the amount of money involved. And so we have a great opportunity. We have young people that want to mention that. I think the future is very bright for making it.
Yeah, I mean, I see it. The big conventional farmers, they're stuck in a market that until recently was very unprofitable, and the weather unpredictability, because you can't say climate change, has caused them to really rethink this idea of sterile soil that won't hold water. So they get the flood, which is followed by a drought, and I think that there's an economic imperative there, but there's also an existential imperative to build a resilient business on resilient soil. And I see this across the country bit by bit. But remember, once you're a local farmer and you do that, you're a pariah in your community. So these are the men and women who are willing to stand alone and stand tall for what they believe.
Thank you for those, what are going to be our final thoughts. I want to end this by thanking everybody for joining this workshop. We're going to have a 15-minute break before our final speaker of the day, Tom Lovejoy. He's going to have a presentation followed by Q&A, and you can find this by clicking on the tab and selecting